we talk about the laws of science, like the law of gravity. People tend to think of those as very ironclad facts. The truth is, a theory is actually a much stronger thing than a law.
Well, especially in the scientific world.
Yeah, because a scientific law is just an observation stating, we know, here's how gravity functions, or at least we know how, gravity changes over distance and that kind of thing. But the theory of gravity not only says this, but then it makes predictions. Okay, how can we test this to ensure that it's correct? A law can't do that. It can just say something. It can't make predictions.
The guidance, the force behind scientific evaluation and hypothesis is that it can be falsified.
Yes.
You cannot falsify God did it.
No.
You cannot falsify. The only way you can falsify any type of religious claim is if you get radiocarbon dating, for instance, which of course the creationists don't believe. There have been some scientists. I'm sorry?
The devil just put it there.
Maybe, except when they go to get their x-ray done at the doctor's office, and they do believe in the exact same procedures that develop the x-rays as the radiocarbon dating machine. This is where there's an entire contradiction among the creationist community. A paleontologist will work 40 or 50 years on a particular subset of his field, usually. And he spends much more time than you or I or anybody else except other paleontologists.
Yeah.
So when you get 5,000 paleontologists at a convention and they argue about a particular fossil for years or even decades, and they finally come to a consensus that this fossil belongs in a particular timeline, here we are as rational people. We have to trust.
Yeah.
We don't believe. We trust that these people have done their homework.
Exactly.
And if they are wrong, that's okay, as long as somebody else comes along with more evidence that proves them wrong. This can't be done with creationism.
Exactly.
When you say God did it,
it's the end of the discussion.
At the end of the discussion, you can't say, well, I can't prove that God didn't do it, but I can prove that what all these other people have done. And if 95% of the consensus believes this as fact, or trusts it as fact, you have a 3 to 5% other minority.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that the creationists quote. All the other scientists, and even people that are in the paleontology circles, but might be English teachers or philosophers. They might not be digging out there. 95% of paleontologists actually do work on the ground.
And just in terms of your field of consensus idea, for a class I recently did some research on HIV. And specifically I did some research on HIV denial. And how that has occurred in Africa and that kind of thing. And, almost every medical professional on the planet believes the HIV leads to AIDS hypothesis. But you take a look at South Africa and what the president of South Africa has done in terms of saying, no, you're all wrong because I found 2 guys who say otherwise. So you have just this huge body of evidence, but 2 guys who
minority consensus
just are saying,
right.
Coming out of nowhere, pretty much like I said, everyone else in the world thinks the sky is blue. Well, I think it is green. It's like, and then you're believing me for whatever reason.
That's right.
So
it might be presented in your favor. If you're on the religious side, you're not going to listen to scientists. This is where religionists and scientists do differ in ideologies. You're going to listen to people that are religious, even more so. And here's the thing about creationists, and I'm going to actually put it on the spot now, really nail it on the head. These people lie.
Yes.
Because if you are a minister and you know that 95% of the people that are in this particular field of study are agreement, and you're basically quoting a very small minority, you don't say that to your congregation.
No.
You say, these 5 people, or these 5%, or these 3% believe this way, but I'm not going to tell you about the other 95% that believe the other way.
You don't even mention that they
It's actually a
exist.
lie.
Obviously your parishioners are going to know that, well, a lot of people say it, but definitely as a public speaker, if your intent really is to make them believe, then it's it's kind of very easy to just make it seem like, oh well, my 5% is actually much bigger than this, and you can't call me on it because you don't know anyways.
That's right. You won't know unless you actually do the research, which I recommend anybody to go to talkorigins.org. And it's really easy. If I was a person who believed devoutly religious in any religion, and my imam or priest or rabbi told me about something, if I did not do any research on it, I would believe him.
Yeah.
I would believe him because, hey, these guys must be smart. They're the head of the church. They're the head of the synagogue, head of the mosque. You know, and I'm not going to question them. Who am I to question them? And even if I do question them, that actually means that I'm questioning my faith.
Yeah.
So the inquisitive nature that you talked about earlier.
Once it gets crushed at that young age, it's very hard to get it started again because there's no impetus, there's no reason to question. You know, you can live your whole life just going, mm-hmm.
Well, scientists actually do say, question us. In fact, scientists love it when people come to them and say, I have new evidence that proves you're wrong. Scientists adore it.
It's great.
They don't reject it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, especially being at UCI and being in, you know, a lot of the scientific community, they get excited. You think I might be wrong? Excellent. That gives me something else to
Show
study.
me the proof. I'd like to see the proof. And then I'll go do the same experiment somewhere else. Or find, go ahead and take your fossil and do more radiological studies on it, radiocarbon dating studies on it. And this is where science evolves. Science is not static like
not
other
all.
religions are. Of course, they hold that to be more absolute truth because it's static.
Yeah, we haven't changed, therefore it's better.
As science evolves, science loves to be proven wrong.
Yes.
Science is not always right, and there have been some fossils that have been actually very misleading and poses. Yes, in fact, I don't know how this happened, but there's certain scientists that actually do certain things, but it's such a minority, and it's very rare to see any of that now. In fact, usually it's simply a mistake that happens. I think they did it with some type of radiocarbon dating from the Mount St. Helens rocks. And it was a chemical dating process, not a radiological dating. Also, if you look on YouTube, and we'll put the favorite YouTube video on at the end of the segment, on foundational falsifications of creationism. Right, that's a tongueful, and I really blew it. So I'm just going to go with it. And I'm going to put that on the website. It's already on the Backyard Skeptics website, but it shows exactly what creationists have done over an actual, I think it's 13 episode, every 10 minutes is an episode. A wonderful explanation of how religionists have picked up those, what am I trying to say, not falsifications, but when a scientist will take two fossils and put it together, or actually chisel away one fossil to make it look a little bit different, which they have done that. And I think the pressure is when in the 1930s, when this was done, was greater to prove something.
A lot of that is still, you know, everyone in the scientific community is horrified when they discover that. Because that, I mean, that kind of cheating,
that's right.
You know, not only is that just completely destroying the point of science, it's hurting everyone else in the scientific community, because then it gives the creationists and all the people who are saying we're full of it, it just gives them ammo to use against us.
But even if future scientists say that's total bunk, he did it wrong, his experiment was wrong, he made something up that wasn't even true, you know, that is...
The damage has been done.
The damage has been done, but you still see the consensus. You don't see any more of that particular... I think this one scientist was, again, it was in the 30s, he was drawing embryos. And he didn't know what 6 of them were in the embryos. He didn't have enough data, so he basically penciled them in. But out of the 60 or 70 embryos that he actually drew, which were correct, 6 of them were wrong. So, of course, the creationists will say, well, the scientists, they just made everything up, when in reality, it was 6, and that's because he didn't have enough data. He didn't have a orangutan embryo that he could draw, for instance, or one particular species.
You know, so you throw those 6 out because they were incorrect, then you take...
Not the entire...
not the entire data set.
Right.
You know, you throw out as much as you need to get away to what is really the truth and what's the real data.
The bottom line is that facts, evidential facts, from a field of study consensus, meaning if you take any archaeological or paleontological group of individuals and see what the consensus is, don't believe us if you're watching this program. Don't believe the creationists. Look for it yourself. Go to a convention or find out what the convention is, and about people who work on this all of their lives. To believe in something with a minority consensus, which you don't even know is a minority, is throwing out hundreds of thousands of man-hours of work for these honest scientists actually trying to find the truth.
I mean, when you aggregate, all these scientists together in, this field of consensus, they have more than an entire human's lifetime spent studying this one
Hundreds
thing.
times more.
Yeah. In terms of the evolution debate, which is very one-sided debate, the proof for evolution is millions and millions of man-hours of effort that have been put into this. People make their entire careers, hundreds, thousands of biologists have made their entire careers looking at evolutions. Yet, all it takes is a couple people saying no, but because they're those minority people, that gives, the creationists or whoever people to latch on to. Even though it's the millions of man-hours.
It's not only short-sighted, but it's almost ignorant to accept one person's belief. Even skeptics tell me of research that they've done that I find unbelievable, and they'll either give me the research paper, they'll quote me a particular website that has a research paper, and then I might find another research paper that identifies that as a similar experiment that has come to the same conclusion. So there I have a fact. If it's repeatable and it's a falsifiable, then I will accept it as a fact.
It requires effort to not be insulated like that. You have to actively go out and search for things that might go against what you believe.
To validate what you believe is true.
Exactly.
If you take something that you truly believe is your personal truth, the only way to validate it is to look totally on the opposite side and say, I'm going to look at this guy's opinion. It's kind of like a second opinion, but even though you already believe the way you do, because if this guy will validate it and he doesn't even believe the same thing I do, then I will say this is an absolute truth, or actually there is no absolute truth. I'll take that back, an accepted truth. Accept the truth. And that's all the time we have for today, Alex. I really appreciate you coming down.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, it was a great discussion. I know I'm going to have to edit it. It's 28 minutes long, but we've talked for more than that, I'll tell you that. So this has definitely been edited. And if you're interested in finding out more about the Secular Alliance for Students, which I'm not sure that's the actual name, but I'll find out more about it before this broadcast is aired, please go to CFI in Hollywood, California. You can also search for CFI West or CFI LA in Los Angeles, California. Either one of those will work. There's 8 different entities within that organization. You can find out a little bit more. Also on our Backyard Skeptics website, that's backyardskeptics.com. You can find out a little bit more about evolution, many links, and including some great YouTube links on it. And once again, thank you very much, Alex, for coming, and maybe you can come here again sometime.
Sounds good.
Very good. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.